We're going to call this committee to order. I want to begin by welcoming our witnesses. Thank you all for being here to discuss your FY24 budget priorities. General Bellin, I think this is your last appearance before this committee. We extend a particularly warm welcome to you and wish you the best in your upcoming retirement. And we don't really care whether you retire in Maine or Montana, but either one of the places will work, okay?
Split the year, maybe.
Yeah, you can flip house in each state. You can move back and forth. Either one will be a heck of a lot better than Kansas, right? At any rate, I want to say thank you for what you guys do. The National Guard and Reserves have always done more with less, fewer full-time personnel, smaller budgets, older weapon systems and vehicles, and aging IT infrastructure and facilities. The men and women that you lead have one foot in civilian life and the other foot in the military. They juggle their homes, their families, their duties, while unselfishly serving their country, both here and abroad. And the workload certainly isn't decreasing, and the ongoing mission on the southwest border, as well as your support to European Command, demonstrate exactly that. However, over the last 5 years alone, the National Guard and Reserves collective forces have shrunk by more than 40,000 service members. You're not immune from recruiting challenges that our active duty military services face, nor are you immune from disruptive impacts of government shutdowns, continuing resolutions. It is my sincere hope that with the threat of government default hopefully averted, we can now make progress on passing the government's budget on time, get it out of the cycle of annual continuing resolutions. I want to hear how you're managing these challenges and how you're providing a ready, modernized Guard and Reserve force as well as ensuring the healthy work-life balance and rewarding military career for these men and women. Once again, I want to thank you for being here. I want to thank you for your testimony ahead of time. But before you begin that testimony, I want to turn it over to Susan Collins. Senator.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for holding this hearing on the National Guard and Reserve component fiscal year 2024 budget request. As the chairman is well aware, I'm very concerned about the budget request and its adequacy. The citizen soldiers of the Guard and Reserve serve in the proud tradition of the Minutemen who fought for the very founding of our country. In fact, the 133rd Engineer Battalion of the Maine National Guard has an unbroken line of service from 1760 to this very day. That's a distinction of which we are all very proud in the state of Maine. By design and consistent with the tradition of our nation's founding, the United States military is not able to fight a war without the Guard and Reserve. For the past 2 decades, Guard and Reservists have accounted for nearly half of deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan. The Guard has also borne the brunt of supporting the Department of Homeland Security along the southern border since 2018, and they will continue to do so until our border is finally secured. The need to properly resource ready, well-equipped, and integrated Guard and Reserve components could not be more clear. The Guard-State Partnership Program is also an essential international security cooperation tool. To date, Guard units have formed 88 partnerships with 100 countries around the world. The Maine Guard's partnership with Montenegro paved the way for that country's successful accession to NATO in 2017. And yet, the President's budget request cuts the Guard and Reserve budget by $3 billion compared to fiscal year 2023 enacted levels, impeding both modernization and readiness. As General Hokanson has previously shared with the committee, the National Guard represents a lower cost option to deliver deterrence and combat power. I understand all of you have considerable equipment shortfalls, and none of you has parity with the active components in terms of fielding the most modern capabilities available. Congress has repeatedly needed to provide the National Guard and Reserves with up-to-date vehicles, platforms, and aircraft that were excluded from inadequate budget requests. Finally, the committee is aware of efforts to transition DoD's ongoing mission at the border from active duty to Guard or Reserve units. I would welcome an update from our witnesses on the status of that plan and what the department's plans are to pay for those deployments. I look forward to the testimony and join the chairman in thanking each of you for your service.
We'll start out with General Hokanson, Chief of the National Guard Bureau. General, you have the floor.
Chairman Tester, Ranking Member Collins, and esteemed members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to testify before you today. Your investment in the National Guard has built a ready, capable, and professional force, vital to our nation's defense and our communities in times of crisis. Thank you for your support. I would also like to recognize the efforts of my wife, Kelly, and our senior enlisted advisor, Tony Whitehead, for their support and partnership in addressing soldier, airman, and family needs. As a community-based force with the authorities to perform almost any mission, ensuring healthy and resilient guardsmen and families is not only our highest priority, it is foundational to all we do. This is my third time before you on behalf of the soldiers, airmen, and families of the National Guard. In that time, the National Guard has repeatedly demonstrated its capability, capacity, and readiness, both at home and overseas, on a historic scale. Over the past 3 years, we performed over 28 million man days in our communities, responding to emergencies of every kind. And as I speak, Guardsmen are supporting typhoon relief operations in Guam. In the last 3 years alone, the National Guard has rescued or saved 18,826 individuals. In the midst of all those events, our formations still met every one of our overseas deployments. This included the nation's final days in Afghanistan, where National Guardsmen helped defend the Kabul airport, evacuate refugees, and then assist with Operation Allies Refuge. One of our other missions is the Joint Multinational Training Group Ukraine. In concert with California's 30-year state partnership with Ukraine, our Guardsmen helped establish a training center in Ukraine after Russia's first invasion in 2014. Focused on combat arms and lessons learned, our National Guard trainers were some of the last to leave Ukraine before Russia's unprovoked invasion. A few months after the war began, we reestablished our training group and have been training our partners every single day since then. Today, every combatant commander leverages our state partnership program, which was recently mentioned, now includes 100 nations around the globe. Always ready, always there is not just our motto, it's our promise to America, a promise we have kept for over 386 years. And in the 2,800 communities we call home, they know whenever or wherever a disaster occurs, the National Guard will be there because we already are. As I begin my final year as chief, there are still many things we must accomplish to ensure the National Guard remains always ready, always there. Today, I'll shorten that list to 4 priority areas. The first is our Air National Guard units who have been performing space missions for over 28 years. In 1947, when the Air Force was established, the Air Guard's 29 original squadrons were established concurrently, and today's Air Force is the envy of the world. In 2019, when the Space Force was formed, it did not address nearly 30% of its operational squadrons that reside in the National Guard. With 1,000 personnel and 14 units, we are almost all tooth and no tail. These highly skilled airmen are absolutely vital to the success of the space mission. And just like our Air Force, We want today's Space Force to be the envy of the world. The second is premium-free health care for currently serving Guardsmen and reservists. There are many things we can surge in times of emergency, but medical readiness is not one of them. Access to care is critical to medical readiness, and the number one concern I hear from our Guardsmen and recruiters when I visit our states and territories. To help recruit and retain the most talented, skilled, and ready force, all National Guard service members, regardless of status, need medical coverage. This is a matter of readiness, a matter of duty to the Guardsmen who serve and sacrifice for our nation. We are working closely with the Adjutants General and the Defense Health Agency to clarify the number of Guardsmen this would impact and what current programs could be reduced or eliminated so we can accurately identify the cost and the readiness benefit it could provide. The third is recapitalization of our Air Guard fighter squadrons. We have 25 fighter squadrons in the Air Guard, and our nation needs every single one of them. By working with the Air Force and Congress, we believe there is a path to recapitalize all 25 squadrons to the F-35, F-15EX, and our newest F-16s through fleet leveling and new aircraft buys. This would help the Air Force divest its older platforms and retain the capability, capacity, and force structure it needs to help meet combatant command and warfighting requirements. Lastly, I ask for your support in meeting the intent of the National Guard Empowerment Act. To be a full member of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and appropriately represent our 430,000 Guardsmen and their families, our Vice Chief cannot do that effectively as a subordinate to his peers. In closing, I want to thank you again for the National Guard we have today. All we do would not be possible without your support that you provide to our soldiers, airmen, and their families. I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, General Hokanson. Next up, we have General Daniels, Chief of the Army Reserve. General?
There we go. Chairman Tester, Ranking Member Collins, distinguished members of the committee, on behalf of the 190,000 soldiers and civilians of the Army Reserve, Command Sergeant Major Lombardo and I thank you for this opportunity to testify and for your continued support to our soldiers, civilians, their families, and our other employers. Present in 20 time zones and on 5 continents, the Army Reserve makes up nearly 20% of the total Army's personnel at just 5% of the total Army operation and maintenance budget. We provide key units and capabilities with nearly half of the Army's maneuver support and a quarter of its force mobilization capacity, while sustaining the mobilization and deployment of more than 10,000 soldiers and civilians annually. As a federal response partner, the Army Reserve maintains a ready posture for defense support to civil authorities by providing critical dual-use capabilities such as petroleum distribution, water purification, and railroad operations. In an extremely challenging recruiting environment, our highest priority is sustaining the resources required to recruit and retain the best, today and into the future. We also rely heavily on the support of families and communities, as well as the willingness of employers to share their best talent. By changing our culture to refocus on tough, realistic training done safely, we are helping to bridge the knowledge divide between the military and the American public. This creates better experiences for civilian soldiers who want to share with their communities. As we build the Army of 2030, we are grateful for the authorizations and appropriations that invest in our people, enhance readiness, and accelerate equipment modernization to maintain superiority over any potential threat. The need for reserve component duty status reform cannot be overstated and is long overdue. That's why we support DoD's proposal to fundamentally redesign the current system, aligning benefits to duties performed and ensuring our soldiers receive the entitlements that they earn. The Army Reserve also appreciates Congress's efforts to improve access to child care. However, accessing quality and affordable child care remains a challenge for our soldiers, especially during battle assembly weekends. As the Army Reserve pilots new initiatives and deepens partnerships, continued congressional support to address weekend child care gaps will help enhance retention and readiness. Finally, as the Army Reserve looks to the future, leveraging the National Guard and Reserve Equipment Account, or NGREA, remains a key component of our modernization strategy. This funding enables the Army Reserve to fulfill mission-critical shortages that improve overall readiness and interoperability. Command Sergeant Major Lombardo are incredibly proud to lead the men and women in America's Army Reserve, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, General Daniels. Next, we have Admiral Mustin.
Good morning, Chair Tester, Ranking Member Collins, and distinguished members of the subcommittee. It's my distinct honor to report to you today, alongside my peer Reserve Service Chiefs and General Hokanson, on the status and the vision of America's Navy Reserve. I'd like to begin by recognizing my wife, Kim, whose steadfast support for 30 years exemplifies the unsung sacrifices typical of our military spouses. And I'd also like to thank Navy Reserve Force Master Chief Tracy Hunt for his tireless efforts in support of our enlisted reserve sailors. Additionally, I'd like to express my thanks and appreciation for my colleague and friend, Lieutenant General Dave Bellin, for his exemplary multi-decade career of service in uniform. We're going to miss you, General. Fair wind, shipmate. Finally, I call the committee's attention to the 103,000 sailors, the 450 civilians, the families who sustain them, and the thousands of employers who value and enable the worldwide service of our citizen sailors. All are essential to the success of our reserve force. For more than a century, the Navy Reserve has reliably responded when needed, in times of peace and times of war. In the recent past, the Navy Reserve provided the rapid activation of nearly 9,000 sailors in response to the coronavirus-19 pandemic, and surged nearly 500 sailors on equally short notice to support the ongoing security crisis in Europe. Most recently, they were instrumental to the execution of non-combatant evacuation operations in Sudan, rapidly removing American citizens from harm's way. These activations highlight the flexibility, readiness, and value our citizen sailors bring to the fight, and yet these contributions merely hint at the demands expected of the Navy Reserve in a conflict with a great power maritime competitor. The Navy Reserve is rapidly transforming to deliver a peerless force, designed, trained, and ready to fight, confidently and boldly in sustained, multi-domain, high-end warfare. To this end, the singular priority of our Navy Reserve is simple: warfighting readiness. Modernizing reserve equipment, training systems, and mobilization processes is critical to delivering this readiness, and a mandate to ensure the readiness and availability of the critical response team our service component and combatant commanders depend upon. To ensure our sailors are ready to activate and serve on day one of any conflict, the reserve force must maintain parity with our active counterparts and operate relevant modern equipment. To this end, procurement of the modern C-130 Juliet aircraft variant to replace legacy C-130 airframes is the Navy Reserve's #1 equipment priority. In the past year, Navy Reserve Fleet Logistics Squadrons flew 26,000 hours, moved 96,000 passengers, and 19 million pounds of cargo, at a cost avoidance of $1 billion over alternative methods. However, with an average age exceeding 3 decades, the current C-130 fleet is unable to meet sustained fleet logistics requirements due to obsolescence issues. In conflict, the strain on supply chain will be an Achilles heel to contested logistics requirements and operations. The KC-130 Juliet is a more capable, modern airframe that delivers increased capacity, supported by cost savings from parts commonality, fuel efficiency, and reduced life cycle costs, resulting in a reduction of $1,000 per flight hour. In addition to equipment modernization, we're leveraging technology advancements to improve and modernize access to work and training, and to bring the Navy Reserve into the 21st century. These comprehensive transformative improvements include hardware and software upgrades, the creation of digital workflows, and the implementation of policies and processes that harness our greatest assets, the minds, talents, ideas, and civilian skills of our reserve sailors. In concert with these efforts, our adaptive mobilization process, demonstrated during our response to the COVID pandemic and multiple mass mobilization exercises, will leverage the Navy Reserve's nationally distributed infrastructure to locally mobilize 50,000 sailors in only 30 days, rapidly, accurately, and at scale. Our reserve sailors are central and vital to our Navy's enduring warfighting advantage, so we're investing in the personal and professional development of every sailor. We're committed to recruiting and retaining the very best of our society, and we're equally committed to maintaining a culture of excellence, eliminating destructive behaviors, ensuring sailor wellness, and fostering a diverse, inclusive culture. Doing so is about warfighting readiness, and doing so enhances the asymmetric advantage generated by our elite winning team. I'm grateful for the committee's support of the Navy Reserve. Our efforts are made possible by the timely delivery of a fiscal year 24 appropriations bill. That provides predictability to our sailors, their families, their employers, and most importantly, to our global combatant commanders. Chair Tester, Ranking Member Collins, and distinguished members of this committee, I remain humbled every day by the commitment and contribution of our citizen sailors, our dedicated civilians, and the supportive families and employers that collectively are your Navy Reserve. Thank you for your continued support and your attention today, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Admiral. Next up, we have General Bellin, Commander of the U.S. Marine Corps Reserve. General.
Chairman Tester, Ranking Member Collins, and distinguished members of the subcommittee, it strikes me it's great to be here with you today to share a conversation, a public conversation with Fourth Sergeant Major Carlos Ruiz and Command Master Chief Mike Mussett, who are seated behind me, about your Marine Corps Reserve. Congress has been a great partner to us as a service as we've been in the middle of this historic inflection point to evolve the Marine Corps in order to meet the threats that we've been directed to meet. And hopefully my comments today will provide a little extra context about what the Marine Corps Reserve has done to meet those demands. Time is what I want to emphasize. This is a time-sensitive task that we have been given by you and by the Department of Defense and by the combatant commanders to evolve quickly in order to first deter and then, if necessary, meet threats. So what have we done about that? What have we actually done in the last year to meet that need with your help? I want to talk about a couple of things specifically. I'll talk first a little bit about a vignette. I mean, the lens through which we see the world, we focus on the Marines first, right? The all-volunteer force effort. We believe in our hearts that we are tasked with winning our nation's battles, and we win our nation's battles with Marines and sailors. We don't man equipment. We equip Marines and sailors. So as we looked deep into the threat and deep into our tasking, what we acknowledge is we have this amazing human capital that joined us because they want to serve. They chose us because they thought it was going to be a harder task. It was going to be more difficult than other choices. And what they're asking us to do is to make their service worthwhile, to honor them with the most difficult tasks, and then to arm and equip them to achieve those tasks. So to that end, we have formed up what we call the Marine Innovation Unit. It was an acknowledgement that this population that we all enjoy have this unique combined experience in education. They have their military service and they have their civilian occupation and education. And if we bound them together, they could do amazing things if we didn't pay attention to military occupational specialties and ranks, and instead to a desire to serve and their human capital. This Marine Innovation Unit accelerated an opportunity for us to transition legacy capacity and capability, and you gave us the tools to do it. By using NGRIA funds from FY22 and 23, we were able to take 400 Marines who were facing a sundowning scenario with legacy equipment, and instead by a littoral craft capability, a maneuver capability that allowed them to not only have a new mission set, but more importantly, reinvigorating them. And here's the lesson I learned from that. By placing littoral craft in both Tampa, Florida, and Galveston, Texas, we went from a scenario where our reenlistment rates in those two companies, because they perceived that their service was undervalued, to some of the highest in my component. They were simply looking for a signal from us collectively that their service is meaningful and that the task we were going to give them would be meaningful. And so with your help and with the help of your staffs in particular, we got great guidance from you, and we moved at the speed of relevance and enabled and empowered these volunteers to continue service in a way that is inspiring. So the future, what do I believe the future is? The other thing we did was we combined the authorities that you have given us by combining the commands of Marine Forces Reserve and Marine Forces South, Southern Command. So we accomplished two tasks at once. We raise the capabilities and readiness of our Marine Forces in the reserves, and also provide capabilities and capacities to a significantly under-resourced combatant command. And I believe the American people want us to do that. And your Marines and sailors love it. I'm excited about the future. The quality of the Marines that we have are phenomenal. The environment for recruiting is going to be difficult. And the American people in our forces are waiting for us to show that service is meaningful and they can trust us as institutions. And today's all about that. So I appreciate the opportunity, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, General. Next up, we have General Healy, Chief Air Force Reserve.
Chairman Tester, Ranking Member Collins, and distinguished members of the subcommittee, on behalf of the 70,000 women of the Air Force, men and women of the Air Force Reserve, it's an honor for me to be here today with my senior enlisted advisor, Chief Master Sergeant Israel Nunez. As a commander, I'm continually amazed by the accomplishments of our reserve airmen as they meet every challenge put forth in front of them on behalf of our nation. This year marks the 75th anniversary of the Air Force Reserve, and during that time, we provided the nation with an operational capability, strategic depth, and surge capacity across every core mission set of the United States Air Force. As a largely part-time force, we provide a ready now, accessible force that is both mission effective and cost efficient. As our near-peer threat increases, we are committed to the Secretary of the Air Force's operational imperatives, the Chief of Staff's vision of accelerate, change, or lose, and the Chief of Space Operations' 3 lines of effort. When I took command of the Air Force Reserve almost a year ago, I issued a task order with my 2 priorities of ready now and transforming for the future. In the past year, we've gotten to prove that ready now force through our ability to rapidly surge and provide experienced reserve airmen to combatant commands and the joint force. Reservists provided critical support to our NATO allies and our European partners and performed everything from intelligence analysis and cybersecurity to airlift and air superiority missions to aircraft maintenance and force protection. The U.S. Air Force and the U.S. Space Force would not be able to support Ukraine and deter Russian aggression without reserve citizen airmen. To optimize our performance as part of the total force, the Air Force Reserve must transform for the future. That transformation requires the Air Force Reserve be proportionally and concurrently modernized with the regular component. Maintaining equipment parity with the regular component ensures our ability to match pacing threats. Legacy aircraft investment without recapitalization and delayed modernization adds substantial risk to the ability to sustain combat-credible air superiority and strategic surge capacity in the future. We're grateful to Congress for the National Guard and Reserve Equipment Account. And GRIA enables us to modernize, sustain our capability, and replace obsolete equipment when recapitalization by the active component is not feasible. Our most important weapon system is our airmen. We're focused on ensuring that reserve citizen airmen receive the support they need. This includes providing mental health resources, investment in resilience initiatives, offering social support through yellow ribbon reintegration programs, implementing recommendations from the Independent Commission on Sexual Assault, and policy changes to remove barriers from service. Over the past 75 years, the Air Force Reserve has provided combat-proven readiness. We are confident the Air Force Reserve will remain prepared to defend our great nation now and in the future. Thank you for your continued support of the Air Force Reserve, its citizen airmen, and their families. I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, General. I want to thank you all for your statements. I appreciate it very, very much. I'm going to start out with a story that's been well documented over the last 2-3 months. It's about a 21-year-old Air Guardsman that posted highly classified documents on the internet, including intel about the war in Ukraine. I can tell you I don't know anybody that can tell me why this person had access to this particular classified information, but it is troublesome, and I don't think it gives the Air National Guard a particularly good look. So, General Hokanson, what can you tell me about the status of the investigation?
Chairman, thank you for the question. With respect to the airmen of the Massachusetts National Guard, the Secretary of the Air Force has initiated an IG investigation, which is just about to complete, and we look forward to the results soon. Any and all recommendations they make will obviously be implemented immediately. With respect to the individual, it's an ongoing FBI investigation, and we look forward to the results of that investigation.
So I think we need to learn from the past as we move forward in the future. How confident are you that with the IG information, with the information you know and the people that you've talked to, that this kind of situation will never happen again?
Chairman, I'm very confident this will never happen again based on what we have found. Unfortunately, we've been doing this for a long period of time. A lot of personnel, a lot of units are doing this. This one individual was an individual action and not indicative of the entire system. But we are looking at safeguards that we can put in place that would prevent any individual in the future from ever being able to do this.
Ultimately, this person didn't do it without somebody above him knowing what was going on. Are the people that allowed this to happen being held accountable too?
Yes, Chairman. They have removed some folks temporarily in light of the investigation, Based on the results of the investigation, not only the active Air Force, or if it applies to the National Guard, we will take appropriate action against those individuals.
Okay. A couple of the presenters talked about the Angria account. Just for a point of reference, Congress has appropriated $2.9 billion over the last 3 years. And by the way, this was a congressional ad to make sure that the Guard and Reserves have the equipment they need, modern equipment that's ready when you're called upon. And I think it's important we plan for how we utilize this money, and so the taxpayer gets the biggest bang for the buck. At the end of March, basically half the money had been spent. As I said, I think it's important to plan, but I think your needs are great. I don't think anybody would dismiss that. For all of you, and be as brief as possible, why does it seem, at least seem to me, that it's taken so long to get this money out the door to actually get the equipment you need? Whoever wants to start, Ken, it doesn't matter.
Chairman, on behalf of the National Guard, we program to get about a 99 to 100% execution of all our NGRIA funding, and as you mentioned, it's absolutely critical to modernization and also for some of our dual-use equipment. Unfortunately, what we have found is some of the supply chain issues has delayed the delivery of some of those goods, but we are on track to spend all of that money.
Anybody else want to comment? Go ahead. General Daniels, go ahead.
So similar to the National Guard, we take a very hard look at what equipping lines are open, what critical dual-use capabilities are prioritized at the top of the list. Sometimes we cannot get access to that equipment in the sequence that we'd like to get it, but we do monitor a lengthy list of requirements and make sure that we spend those funds judiciously across the 3 years that we have the funds available to us.
Admiral?
Comment was going to be very similar in that with the 3-year look, we phase out the expenditures. There is pressure in a CR environment, however, for new starts or new contracts, which has delayed in some cases what we had intended to originally buy. So we'll probably address that topic at a later moment, but CR certainly have an impact on us.
Okay, General.
Yes, sir. For us, the biggest delay this year was the fact that we wanted to re-roll some of the money you had already approved, and your staff, some of who are sitting here, helped us with that. We're going to be 100% committed this year, and as a good teammate, if there's any left over, we'll spend that too.
General Healy.
Yes, sir, the same. The CR does impact our ability to get a start with it, but once we do get started, the money does flow through our proportional multi-year plan of implementation. We plan to fully execute.
Thank you. I got about 20 seconds left. General Hokanson, you talked about 25 flying missions within the Guard. You needed every one of them, I believe is what you said. A-10s are going away, and they should go away. How many missions does that impact?
So, Chairman, specific to the A-10s, we have 3 squadrons, and all 3 would convert to a more current aircraft, either F-35, F-15EX, or one of the what's called a post-block F-16, our newest ones.
Okay, so there are plans for every A-10 mission that goes away in the Guard to replace them with another fighter mission?
Yes, sir. That is the plan that we're working with the U.S. Air Force on, and we believe through fleet leveling and by current scheduled aircraft buys or any additionals, we could provide the ability to do that.
Okay, Senator Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to follow up on the important issue you just raised, since we've heard our witnesses talk about the need to recapitalize the aircraft fleet. General Healy, I understand that more than 3/4 of the 25 Air Guard fighter squadrons operate legacy F-15 fighter aircraft. That obviously reduces interoperability and compatibility with active duty units. The disproportionate fielding of aircraft affects other units as well, such as the Air Refueling Wing in my home state of Maine. My understanding is that the current KC-46A basing plan places 71% of the new KC-46 with active units, 14% with reserve units, and 15% with Guard units, even though the Guard flies almost 38% of all Air Force tankers. So it seems disproportionate to me if only 15% of the new aircraft is going to the Guard if the Guard is flying 38% of all Air Force tankers. Should new aircraft be fielded in a manner that is proportional to the Guard's operational contributions?
Ma'am, I agree 100% that it appears disproportionate right now. The 77% of the Air Force Reserve's fleet is legacy. And in the words of the Secretary of the Air Force, legacy is defined as does not concern the PRC in a fight. KC-135s, C-130Hs, pre-block F-16s, A-10 divestment are all issues and concerns for the Air Force Reserve in terms of proportionality. The National Commission on the Structure of the Air Force in 2014 called for and recommended proportional and concurrent fielding of weapon systems with the Guard and Reserve in association with the active component. And we're constantly advocating adherence to that recommendation. As weapon systems are upgraded and recapitalized in the active component, if the Guard and the Reserve, and specifically my concern, the Reserve, are not proportionally recapitalized, we will ultimately lack the capacity and the capability to participate in that near-peer fight if we're still flying in 37-year-old aircraft, pre-block F-16s. Whether it's the F-16 to the F-35, one-for-one KC-135s to the KC-46, or any of the bombers for the B-21 family of systems, we're looking to contribute, and we want to be that surge capacity that we've provided for the last 75 years.
Thank you very much. General Hokanson, I want to follow up on the chairman's questions to you about the Massachusetts Air National Guard member who has been accused of leaking classified documents. What was most disturbing to me was when I learned through some of the court filings that there was an Air Force memoranda that indicated that he had been repeatedly warned. So this was not a deviation that came out of the blue, but in fact, he had been reprimanded and he had been instructed to, quote, stop any deep dives into classified intelligence information and focus on his job. He, quote, had been observed taking notes on classified intelligence materials. These reports are very concerning because it appears that this serious breach might have been prevented or stopped much sooner if the Airman's Guard unit had taken greater action to restrict his access to classified information. My question is, what is the standard practice when someone has been reprimanded for misuse of classified information and then does it again? That, to me, shouldn't require an IG report. That should be on the books now, I would think.
Yes, Senator, I found this extremely concerning as well. Anytime there's a disciplinary action, the chain of command should address it immediately. I know it's not specifically the IG investigation that's looking at, but also the FBI investigation is looking at that to determine if there was negligence within the airman's chain of command. At the time, he was mobilized under Title 10, working for a combatant commander, and we were looking at very closely the chain of command, who was responsible for that, and if there was negligence on their part, it will be addressed immediately.
Thank you.
Senator Shaheen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for being here. As the co-chair of the National Guard Caucus, I'm especially appreciative of hearing your concerns this morning. General Hokanson, I want to start with you, and I think you may wish to weigh in as well, General Healy, but in your opening statement, you talked about the readiness concerns, and you mentioned specifically the fighter squadrons, but I'm with the 157th Air Refueling Wing in New Hampshire at Pease Air Force Base. I'm very concerned about the status of those KC-46 units, both the fact that we still don't have all of them flying the way they were commissioned to fly, but also what we have seen at the 157th is that they've faced cuts to their personnel, placing them about 5% below the national average. While I recognize that you face constraints, and you all talked about that, I am very concerned that we've got these aircraft sitting in New Hampshire, and I know they're being used, but it doesn't feel like they're being used to their full extent because of those personnel constraints. So can you talk about how you expect to resolve some of those issues? And I understand you're conducting a manning study for the KC-46. So when do you expect the results of that study, and do you have any insights into what that's going to show?
Yes, Senator, and you bring up a great organization. In fact, I believe that refueling unit just set a world record for the longest continuous flight of an aerial refueler. So it is a great.
We're very proud of them.
Yes, ma'am. It's a great organization, and when we look across the entire Air National Guard, as I'm sure the Air Force Reserve does as well, if we have any positions that are in excess of our authorized end strength, we need to account for those. Now, the personnel actions were not specific to the 157th, but really holistically at all of our Guard units. But because you're the first of our KC-46 units, we're evaluating it on an annual basis to make sure that we have the right number of personnel in the right positions so that we can fully leverage the capability of that system. And so this is a temporary measure, ma'am, to keep in touch with what we're authorized. But as we review this and identify additional capabilities, we will reallocate the manpower to fill those shortages.
But it's been temporary now for several years.
Yes, ma'am. And that is, as we've mentioned before, our end strengths have reduced in some cases. And so we've got to look across the entire Air National Guard to identify where that personnel savings could come from.
And so do you have any insights from the staffing study for the KC-46? Do we know what that might recommend?
I'm not aware of that right now, ma'am, but I can follow up with our staff on the exact specifics of that study.
General Healy, do you have any additions to that?
With the reserve KC-46 units, we're currently Seymour Johnson in North Carolina, and we've seen great results in terms of coming up to speed and delivery on schedule. I know that the Air Force, the Air Mobility Command, is holding the manufacturers to task to ensure that we're releasing all the capabilities as fast as they're able and to recover the capabilities that weren't initially produced the way they should be. We're very much looking forward to deliveries to March Air Reserve Base out in California next, and expect by then, with the first aircraft delivery in 26, we expect to see a fully capable KC-46.
How many years late?
Yes, ma'am.
I appreciate that, but I think it's a message to Boeing to do better in the future as well. General Daniels, you mentioned the importance of child care in your opening statement, and I think that's very critical that we think about how important that is. We have an interesting cooperative effort between the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard and the Air National Guard in New Hampshire to do a joint child care center that they would share. But can you speak to why that's so important to the Guard?
Yes, ma'am. My challenge is that I've got 850 Army Reserve centers sprinkled across the United States, most of which are not within a 50-mile radius of a major installation. Therefore, they're out in communities, and historically we've had challenges finding weekend care. We just can't find the providers that are willing to work on weekends. So we've done a number of different pilot activities over the past year, and that is still our challenge. We found a couple of organizations we think we're going to make some inroads with to help us have that weekend opportunity.
Well, thank you. I look forward to hearing more about what you learn and seeing how this committee can be supportive of that. I'm out of time, but General Hokanson, I just wanted to go to your first priority for how the Guard gets integrated into the Space Force, because I think that is a very real concern. I have asked General Saltzman about that issue on several occasions, and the ambiguous response has not been reassuring. So I hope that we can continue to work with you on how that gets done. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Shaheen. From the beautiful Sunflower State, Senator Moran.
Thank you, Chairman. I've always known you to tell the truth, at least on some occasions. Thank you, all of you, for being here. Thank you for your service to our nation. I understand and appreciate the crucial role that the National Guard and Reserve play, our components play in our military. Disaster at home, around the world, you are there and a great asset to the well-being and national security of our country. General Hokanson, to follow up on Senator Shaheen's beginning a conversation about the space mission, when General Saltzman was in front of this committee, I asked him about the creation of a Space National Guard. He testified that his best military advice supported the most cost-effective alternative that preserves operational capabilities. In your best military advice on creation of a Space National Guard, how would you answer that request from General Saltzman?
Senator Brand, thank you for the question. And I would argue that the comments that the Chief of Space Operations made describe exactly the Air National Guard units performing the space mission. For my best military advice, when I look at the fact that we've been doing this mission for over 28 years, in some cases we're the only ones that have ever done those missions. We've got 14 units of about 1,000 people. We're about 30% of the operational squadrons today. And to me, my greatest concern is readiness to the force. And by simply redesignating those Air Guard units performing the space mission to a Space Guard type organization, I could do that within the resources that I currently have in my budget. And it would simply be from one drill weekend to the next, where our airmen would change their name tape from Air Force to Space Force. And at no time would it interrupt the capabilities they provide to our nation. The personnel would stay in the same place, same civilian jobs, doing the same mission that they're doing every single day today. In fact, some of them are deployed right now, providing that support to our nation. My concern is, if we looked at reestablishing him and another component, it could cost our nation about $1 billion. And that is not only to restructure and rebuild this within a different component, but then also the need to retrain those current Air Guard members that are performing the mission into another mission set. And overall, when you look at this, it's, I think, a very easy decision.
Thank you, sir. I was going to ask you about the cost to stand up a National Guard component, and perhaps you've answered that, but I'd give you the chance in a sentence to make that clear.
Yeah. Yes, sir. So we look at the cost of about $640 million to remission what currently exists into a future type organization. But the concern that we have is right now the Air National Guard space units are the only unit-equipped surge-to-war go capability. Our Air Force Reserve counterparts that are being incorporated in the Space Force are primarily individual fillers, whereas the National Guard is actually manned, trained, and equipped units. The concern there as well is when you look at the 28 years of experience that we have, to replicate that or to reconstitute it may take 7 to 10 years to get those folks through schools and trained, and I don't think our nation can afford to see that reduction in readiness over that time period.
Thank you, sir. General Daniels, would you elaborate on the significance of the National Guard Reserve Equipment Account to the U.S. Army's Reserves mission?
Thank you for that. It is vital to my ability to modernize. The Army has focused on lethality and modernizing its lethality elements over the last several years and looking forward to the 2030, 2040 future battles. The Army Reserve is primarily combat support and service support, and therefore our modernization efforts have lagged behind those of the lethality elements. And so the NGREA account supports about 35 to 40% of my ability to modernize in terms of raw dollar value.
Thank you. General Hokanson, you and I have had a conversation. I appreciate what you told me. I have a goal of seeing that the Starbase program is expanded in Kansas. STEM education is hugely important to the national security and economic well-being of our nation. Starbase, which I have visited on several occasions, is very compelling in its mission and having success. But we have parts of the state, particularly those that are the most rural, that are underserved or unserved, and I appreciate your willingness to work with me to see that we change that circumstance. And General Bellin, we appreciate your service to the nation. Thank you for your testimony today, but thank you for the years you have spent in duty to country. And all Kansans, and particularly those who share your alma mater, are particularly honored by that service.
Senator Baldwin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to all of our witnesses this morning. General Hokanson, you have listed health care for the National Guard force as a command priority. Like you, I believe that increasing access to health care and dental care for our Guard and Reserves service members would pay dividends in readiness, especially for short-notice deployments. Last Congress, I introduced the Health Care for Our Troops Act, a bill that would provide all National Guard and Reserve service members premium-free health care coverage. Can you please describe the impact of this proposal, what sort of impact it would have on increasing the readiness of the total force?
Thank you, Senator, and I think you hit it right on the head. The premium-free health care and dental care as well are critically important. And having been through multiple deployments, one of the biggest things that we see to address in readiness is medical and dental readiness for our personnel to go. In fact, I would say that's the largest thing that impacts our readiness. And so having that ability so that every guardsman and reservist that's in uniform and serving that has that ability to get preventative care or care when they need that, and the same with dental care, will ensure their medical readiness. And we look at the investment that we put in our individuals in terms of the training and the time that goes into it. And not only that, but their investment and their time away from their families and employers. To me, this is the best way to ensure that when we make that call, they're ready to go to answer whatever our nation needs them to do.
Thank you. General Hokanson, last month, the F-35 aircraft started to arrive at Truax Field in Madison, Wisconsin, entrusting the Wisconsin Air National Guard with a critical capability for our nation's defense. I have a couple of questions about that basing. The unit supports a significant number of jobs. What are the economic benefits for the local community that we can anticipate from hosting the F-35 fighter wing?
So, ma'am, first and foremost, just the community there that established such a fantastic unit, obviously came out through the Air Force basing process. The benefits there is there's aerial ranges, there's gunnery ranges, there's aerial refueling units nearby, and there's airspace, which made that just a great choice. But when you look at the community, now you have a state-of-the-art aircraft that's going to be there for decades. And the number of folks that employs and are going to be there to support that unit are going to make a huge difference to the local community. And frankly, having been there, just the coordination between the unit and the local community makes a huge difference.
Yes. While I'm very grateful that my home state is making a significant contribution to national security, I would say that neighbors proximate to the airport are concerned about the impact of increased noise in the area surrounding the airport. I helped secure resources in a previous appropriations bill to help us start planning for noise mitigation activities. Can you please elaborate on efforts the National Guard is taking to help with this planning and to engage the local communities that will be impacted by the noise?
Yes, Senator. So the key there is for us to work with the FAA and also the unit. And as we get the aircraft in, to identify those areas where we can reduce noise. And this may affect the approach patterns that they use or the type of approaches into the airport, also their departures. And also working with the air crews to identify the areas where they can reduce noise. And then also make the communities aware of grants or resources available to them to help reduce the noise locally.
And are these activities well underway?
Yes, ma'am, as we get more aircraft, and I look forward to being out there September 7th for the welcome ceremony. But I think as we go on, they're going to definitely want to be good neighbors with the community there because they're great supporters of that organization.
Thank you.
Senator Bozeman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you all for being here. We appreciate your service. I always enjoy getting to visit with you when we talk about military construction, and we appreciate your service, and as always, we appreciate your families. This is certainly a family affair, and again, all that you represent. General Daniels, one key element of funding for the reserve component is the funded reimbursable authority. Each year, this committee authorizes this funding authority for military intelligence activities in support of combatant commands and defense agencies. Can you speak to the importance of this authority, and if you believe funded reimbursable authority should be expanded to other high-demand skills such as cyber and space activities?
Yes, thank you. The funded reimbursable authority allows those combatant commands to use their operational funds to bring on and pay for reservists, and it's done in a voluntary manner, and it allows them to have additional capacity for those folks who are available and willing and capable of using their civilian skill sets and their military trained skill sets to support the requirements within the combatant commands. Expanding beyond intelligence or those other key technical areas would be of great value to the commands, and it allows the individuals to, again, use those civilian and military acquired skills and be very expert and facile in those areas. So expansion would be certainly be welcome.
Good. Thank you very much. Duty status reform is an initiative that seeks to streamline and simplify the activation and utilization of reserve component members. Efforts to consolidate this burdensome duty status system has gone on for almost 3 decades, which I know has been frustrating for our service members. Can you all just kind of jump in and, if you would, briefly discuss how consolidating the system would positively impact service members and their families and increase retention? How can Congress be more helpful in getting this effort? Again, this is something we've talked about forever, but with the situation that we're in now, with retention and this and that, it's more important than ever.
So, Senator, I'll start out. When we look at the 28 different duty statuses, the ability under duty status reform to reduce these to about 8 really simplifies how we would mobilize and utilize our guardsmen and reservists. But the biggest thing that we have a concern is we just want equal pay for what we do. We want either guardsmen or reservists to be treated exactly the same as their active duty counterparts if they're doing the same mission at the same location at any time. The last thing we want is 2 soldiers or airmen or sailors or Marines to be standing next door to each other and one's getting benefits that the other one isn't. Right. And so this goes a long way to resolve that and really address some issues that have long gone neglected.
Very good. Anybody else?
Yeah, we would fully endorse being able to have that passed into law to help us not only to have equal pay and equal entitlements for for those same activities, but also to remove the administrative burden of knowing which is the right pay status to put someone in and simplifying the entire process for everyone that's involved. That would be of great value and time savings as well.
Very good. General Bellin, as we all know, every service has encountered challenges with meeting their recruiting goals. What has the Marine Corps Reserve done to meet your specific goals, and are there specific examples you can provide that will help this committee better understand how we can help all the services going forward?
Well, I think, sir, for this year, I think we're the only one that came close to meeting the goal, but our requirement is smaller. So let me frame that, and our population we're recruiting is slightly different. But I don't think we should draw the wrong conclusions. I would say we were successful this year, but as you know, sir, the Commandant of the Marine Corps, the Secretary of the Navy, and the Assistant Commandant all have testified that the future end strength of the Marine Corps Reserve is going to be back at 37,000. We're at 33,000 today. That has to happen by the end of the decade. And as I look at where we are now, the trends in society, I have questions about how we're going to do that. So one of the things we are doing is proactively looking at reestablishing capacity where the population is and will be. By that I mean some of our drill centers are located where the population was in the 50s. Right. It's not where it is and will be. So there are a number of things we're doing, but a big part of it is simply proving to the American people that service is honorable and worthwhile. And as you know, the trends are not good in that direction. And I don't see that as a bad thing. Should we not have to prove to our citizens occasionally that the nation is worth defending? Absolutely.
Right. Very good. Thank you all. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Hoeven.
Thanks. Just picking up on that, General, how do you do that? How do you convince them that, that they should want to step up and serve?
Well, I had a vignette earlier where worked with your staff. We had a need that emerged, a very, very fast need for littoral craft capability. At the same time, we were looking at sundowning a couple of units that were very healthy in Florida and Texas. And the demonstration by working with this committee and the staff and Congress in general to find the right authorities to move at the speed of relevance took 2 units whose reenlistment rates were going down because they saw no future in service. And now they're among the top of all of my formations. And all they needed was a demonstration from us that we value the service, and we're going to give them the tools and equipment they need to be ready when the nation needs them. So that's an example of what we can do. But I also think days like this, where we have open testimony and we demonstrate an open conversation, that we're trying to find ways to reestablish some of the faith and confidence we might have lost over the previous years.
I'd add a recruiting tool that I think is incredibly important and has great utility not only for the services and not only for the individuals while they serve with you, but for their future as well, and that's the Federal Tuition Assistance Program. And I'd like each of you to weigh in on that, and I want to start with you, General Hokanson, because we put together and funded a pilot program through this committee. That Air National Guard Reserve pilot program is incredibly important, not only to recruit those individuals in, but to keep them. And there's a difference between the services, and there's a difference between active duty and Guard and Reserves. And I think we need to beef that thing up right now. It won't only help pull people in, it'll help keep them in, and it'll make them better soldiers, airmen, Marines, you name it, for all of you. And I'd like to hear from each one of you on that.
Yes, Senator, it's a great program. And when I visit the 54, when I always talk to our recruiters and I ask them, what are those things why people still come in? And education is still one of those consistent things. And we've been fortunate, and we look across the entire National Guard, all of them but Guam, the state helps provide tuition assistance so that we have that stability throughout the process. Unfortunately, we had to balance sometimes with the fiscal year and the academic year to fully utilize that funding. But anytime we have the ability to utilize that, not only for tuition assistance, but also for tuition payback, and then also retention bonuses, will make a huge impact.
You agree we should make it a priority to get that in place and strengthen it as a tool for recruitment and retention?
Yes, sir. Education, any benefits we can provide to them is always a benefit when it comes to recruiting.
Thank you. Now come back to General Bellin and ask the same of the others.
Briefly, I would just offer this context. Less than 1% volunteer. So who are they? They have a call to service already. So anything we can do to invest in them has an amazing return on investment from a citizen's perspective. They're self-motivated. They already have a call to service. Why wouldn't we invest in them?
Yeah, particularly if they enlist in the Marine Corps, right? Not easy duty. General?
So the Army Reserve used about $25 million of tuition assistance in 22, and then $31 million this year, and we've put in a request for about $33 million next year. It's a growing, and it's credentialing assistance is another fund that we use simultaneously. It's super important for our members to become more and more educated, along with not just only our enlisted, but our warrants as well. They leverage the credentialing assistance quite a bit, so this is vital for us to keep them on the cutting edge of their technical experience for their civilian careers, and then to be ahead of their peers. So it's super important.
Admiral?
It's a winning program, and we recognize the impact both on recruiting, which is obvious in that we can offer this incentive. Secondly, we've continued to, like Lieutenant General Daniels, to invest within the Navy Reserve for selected reserve tuition assistance as a new program, also recognizing the benefit that provides to our sailors. The Navy is a very technical force. That education benefits the individual, but it's a selfish interest on my part as well to ensure that our sailors are trained and ready to perform when we need them.
Right. I mean, I've been waiting to hear somebody lob that in. I mean, you're becoming so technologically sophisticated, every one of you, that they need that ongoing education to handle all the amazing systems that you have and we're developing.
Absolutely, Senator. I would say that in the past we used to say, hey, we're competing for the same resources to recruit against the Marine Corps or the Air Force or the Army. Now I tell people we're competing with Amazon, Google, Meta, and others. It's a very technical
Absolutely.
out there.
General?
Yeah, the Navy beat me to the punch on that one. It's, the Air Force is absolutely a very technical
Yeah,
field, every one of them. And the $4,500 a year that we spend on tuition assistance absolutely directly impacts our ability to recruit and retain.
Tester and I have to get old pickup trucks because the technologies on the new one we can't figure out, so.
100% correct.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Murkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all. Thank you for your service. Thank you. Certainly on behalf of the state of Alaska, we certainly appreciate our Reserve and our National Guard service members and the civilians. They provide extraordinary support to us in the state and certainly to the country. We've got continued success that we see with innovation readiness training, IRT, certainly when it comes to homeland defense, missile defense, absolutely key, air refueling, combat search and rescue, strategic airlift. There's just so much. And so we are very grateful. I'm very, very proud of the Guards and Reserve men and women who serve us and provide such benefit. I also am thankful for the cost savings that you bring to all of the effort here. So, General Hokanson, we had an opportunity yesterday to visit about some of the more specific concerns that you and I had shared, but we have discussed previously the issue of the Space Force and the mission there of the Air Guard's 213th Space Warning Squadron at Clear Air Force Base. They've been doing extraordinary work there with the ground-based radar missile warning mission since 2006 now. We're seeing Space Force becoming more mature. That's good. But I've been concerned that there hasn't really been a clearly articulated or perhaps an adequate plan to ensure that these airmen and their mission are cared for in a way that works going forward with the Space Force. I fear that they may miss out on opportunities or education or equipment. I understand that prior to my arrival at committee here, you did address a question regarding the Space Force to Senator Moran. I appreciate that. I don't know if you want to add anything further to that in terms of your opinion on the establishment of the Space National Guard to really ensure that these Guardians are equipped and trained for the mission set that they clearly are in the front on.
Yes, Senator, and as clear as you mentioned, this goes back to, once again, the years and years of experience that our airmen have doing this mission set and just the incredible capability they provide our nation each and every day. And as you mentioned, we're the only unit-equipped surged go-to-war capability that exists within the reserve component for the space mission. And so having a clear pathway for them will not only help with our current recruiting, but it will also ensure that all of those years of experience, all the work that they have done, and frankly, the ability of our guardsmen to bring, over half of them have backgrounds in technical or high-tech or aerospace industries. They bring that knowledge base to work with them when they come to drill. And, you know, we rely on them to deploy around the globe and continue to do their mission. So anything and everything we can do to retain them. And as I mentioned earlier, my best military advice to reduce any impact at all to readiness or the ability to field these units would be to transfer the current Air National Guard units doing the space mission into a National Guard component for the Space Force so they can continue everything they're doing today, tomorrow.
Thank you for just clarifying that and putting that on the record. I appreciate it. I'd like to direct a question to you, General Healy. I think fair to say that we're both pretty proud of the 477th Fighter Group, U.S. Air Force's oldest, most experienced F-22 unit in the inventory. I think they produced some pretty qualified fighter pilots. You had mentioned in your testimony the term concurrent and proportional fielding that allows the Air Force Reserve to incorporate new aircraft at the same rate and proportion as our active duty components. How will the concurrent and proportional fielding affect units like the 477th, especially as we're looking to the new airframes coming on, such as the Next Generation Air Dominance and the E-7s.
Thanks very much for the question, ma'am. And I don't know who wants to brag more on the 477th. I've had the great opportunity to go twice this year up to Anchorage to visit them. Simply put, twice the F-22 fighter experience than their active duty counterparts, 3 times the fighter time experience than their active duty fighter time, or active duty counterparts makes them the most experienced F-22 unit in the entire Air Force, and they're exactly where they need to be, at the forefront of the defense of the country. They are the tip of the spear that Alaska provides. I think as we look towards the future and possible recapitalization from F-22s into the possibility of next generation air dominance, I think that air superiority experience in 5th-gen aircraft will translate perfectly and would be the template to go by if we were to look at concurrent proportional servicing of and progression to the NGAD family of systems. Likewise, with the E-7, the experience both with the Guard in Alaska and the reserves in the continuous states allows us to provide that same degree of expertise and experience moving forward.
Good, thank you. Mr. Chairman, I've got a couple more questions, but I will submit those for the record.
Perfect. Senator Durbin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I chair the Senate Judiciary Committee, and it just happened to adjourn in time for me to make this hearing, and I'm glad to be here. I'd like to say to all the witnesses, the GAO noted last year that the Pentagon is facing the most challenging recruitment environment in 50 years. The Army, for example, has especially struggled to meet recruitment goals. The service missed its in-strength number by 15,000, or 25% in fiscal year 2022. I'm glad to see this budget request increases competitive compensation and funding for recruitment marketing programs, as well as improving quality of life for current service members. So I'd like to ask you if you would tell me how what the impact has been on the Guard and Reserve of this recruiting challenge. Open.
Senator, I'll start with the National Guard. So when you look at where we are today, our recruiters, particularly on the Army side, have really been able to adjust to the current environment. And we've seen a steady increase in our recruiting abilities. In fact, we've been over 100% the last 3 months. And right now, the Army National Guard is on path to meet our end strength by the end of the fiscal year. In terms of the Air National Guard, we're a little bit challenging environment. We look at to be at about 97% of our authorized end strength by the end of the year. But we have seen very positive increases, especially over last year. Now, I'm not declaring victory, but I'm saying right now, all the trends are very positive, and we hope to continue those into the new year and make sure we maintain our Army National Guard authorized end strength and reach our Air National Guard authorized end strength.
Tell me what the elements are that you think are most persuasive for those who are enlisting.
For those, and Senator, thank you for the question. When I go across the 54, I visit with recruiters everywhere I go. Educational benefits are one of the first things they bring up. The other one is benefits such as health care. What they're finding in the current environment to be competitive is many companies are now offering benefits that they didn't before, medical, educational benefits. And so the competition out there for the same individuals is getting much stronger. And then also internally, we're working with our own systems, and that is reducing the time it does to get personnel to get waivers, and also addressing policies that are preventing some folks from serving.
Any of the other members of the panel have a comment?
Yeah, Senator, I think it's important to realize the math component here. The population that we're all trying to recruit right now is significantly smaller among Gen Z than the millennials. So that's a fact we have to deal with. But also the propensity to serve has diminished. And that's all about us earning the confidence of the American people back that service is worthwhile. So it's a pretty holistic problem, but there is a math component as well. Thank you.
I'd like to just make a comment. I'm about to say something that is a secret. It's not classified, but I'm going to share it with you. We have 780,000 DACA recipients, people who are protected under DACA, many of whom want to serve this country where they grew up. There's an obstacle, Congress. We have not given them a pathway to citizenship. This should be a pathway. You ought to open up your opportunities. We should across the board in the military to dreamers and to DACA recipients who really want to serve this country and I think are genuine about it. For some reason, there's been a resistance. Perhaps it was the luxury of a lot of recruits, and we didn't need others. But I would just tell you, I've met them, I know them. They made great sacrifices just to have this opportunity to wear the uniforms you're wearing today. And I hope that when you're in the highest levels of the Pentagon that you'll discuss this candidly. Your predecessors have not always been cooperative when I've raised this issue. There's a resistance because these folks are, quote, undocumented. They may not have been born here, but they love this country as much as any of us who pledge allegiance to that flag. So I hope you'll consider that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Capito.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank all of you, and I add my voice of thanks and gratitude to all of you for your service and to your families as well. I wanted to ask General Hokanson, West Virginia is the home to some of the National Guard Special Forces capabilities, including the Special Operations Detachment Europe and the 2nd Battalion 19th Special Forces Group. Can you speak to the importance of the Guard's Special Forces capabilities and what they contribute to the joint force?
Yes, Senator, it's an incredible capability. When you look at the two Special Forces groups that are not on the active component, they're both in the Army National Guard. And if you go back really to the early days of 9/11, it was Guard Special Forces folks that were there, and they have served admirably around the globe ever since that time. For us, it's something we work very closely with Special Operations Command to make sure that we make the ability for those leaving active duty to come into the National Guard, and then also to recruit those directly out of the National Guard into our formations. It's a critical skill set that we utilize each and every day, and our combatant commanders can never get enough of them. So we're doing everything we can to recruit and retain and provide those bonuses and incentives to keep them in our formations.
So you have a transition pipeline from active to for the Special Forces talents. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely, ma'am.
Yeah, good. I would note that in the early days of 9/11, when the Special Forces deployed, we lost the good West Virginian at the very beginning of that, and he was in Special Forces National Guard. This is kind of a technical question, and I'm going to ask it, but I'm not sure exactly what I'm asking in terms of the technical parts of it. Accurate positioning, navigation, and timing, and GPS services are essential to U.S. critical infrastructure and for military operations. So our state is one of the states of West Virginia to participate as a test site for the National Guard's National Integration of Time Resiliency for Operations, or called NITRO. Could you tell me a little bit about NITRO and where you see that's going and how important that is?
Yes, ma'am. It's a very important capability because it provides alternate resilient timing for GPS, and many of our systems operate on that. Currently, we have 6 states that have fielded it, and we're working very closely to support the states because this provides that capability to the states and local first responders in the case there's a loss of the GPS terrestrial signal.
Does this capability go through all different forces? I mean, would this be something that every Guard and Reserve would have a great deal of interest in?
We're not sure of the exact fielding plan, ma'am. It's based on the funding that's provided, but we do have it in 6 states right now, and 21 others have expressed an interest. So we're looking at the long-term viability of this, or if there are other alternate capabilities that provide the same.
Right. Does anybody else want to speak to that? Let me ask a question on cybersecurity. I know, I'm assuming that all of you have certain cybersecurity components. Is it growing? How important is it to you? And is there a coordinating aspect to this across the forces? So I'm going to start over here with General Bellin.
I think, acknowledging we're in the information age, it's only going to get more important. It's vital to everything we do. And I think for all of us, we're looking for a more streamlined way for us to get our Marine soldiers, sailors, and airmen who have civilian expertise and qualifications, but may not have the military occupational specialty, to find a way to expedite their access to our systems that doesn't exist right now. It's a very Byzantine, very ham-handed approach that we have now. We need to do better than that.
Yeah. General?
So the Army Reserve is looking to expand the amount of our force that is cyber warriors. We're growing out a cyber protection brigade, adding in additional capabilities, And I meet once a quarter with the Army Cyber Lead, along with the Army National Guard Director, and we coordinate activities to make sure that we're not hitting the training pipeline too heavy, too fast. We're trying to make sure that we're all in sync as we go forward, looking to 2030.
Okay, I'm going to go to the Admiral next. I'm going to skip you.
So cyber is a growth area for the Navy
Right.
and the Navy Reserve. So we currently have about 8,000 sailors within our information warfare community, and we continue to work very closely with Cybercom as well as our Fleet Cyber, which is 10th Fleet, to ensure that the creation of our cyber protection teams and offensive cyber capability continues to mature. Where I see this happening most effectively is also related to our recruiting initiatives, because we've got some
Absolutely.
fantastic civilians that can walk in the door immediately, and we can do direct commission. We've recently created a new cyber designator, which is a pretty significant step from a community management perspective.
Or out the door. I mean, once they've served and maybe they've decided when they want to transition, they've got such an incredible skill set here.
Yes, ma'am.
I mean, to me, that's a big selling point. And finally, yeah.
Yes, ma'am. The absolutely a growth industry within the Air Force Reserve, currently getting into mission assurance, increasing in defensive and offensive cyber operations, and absolutely looking always towards leveraging our civilian experience and taking that to
Right.
benefit the Reserve as well.
Right. So General Hokanson, did you have you want to wrap it up on cyber?
Yes, Senator. Obviously, we have 4,000 cyber professionals in the Guard. We're part of the Cyber National Mission Force and fully integrated to Cybercom. The one thing I would highlight, though, is we have state partnerships with 100 nations. One of their greatest requests is to help them with the cyber defense and network defense in their country. And we're finding when we look at misinformation campaigns that this is absolutely critical to helping our partners and allies. And that's something we leverage at every opportunity.
Thank you all very much.
We appreciate your testimony here today. We appreciate your work in making sure that our national defense is up to where it needs to be. General Bellin, we wish you all the best in the next phase of your life. Senators may submit additional questions. We had asked that if additional questions come in, that you answer them as quickly as you possibly can. The Defense Subcommittee will reconvene on Tuesday, June 20th at 3:30 p.m. for a classified hearing with the intelligence community. This committee stands in recess.